From Las Vegas, Nevada, the entertainment capital of the world, I'm David Gavri, and this is the Vegas Faces podcast, where we talk with Las Vegas locals about what it's really like to live in the City of Lights. Whether you're living in Vegas, moving to Vegas, or just visiting Vegas and looking for new adventures, together let's discover the hidden gems that make Sin City the most visited place on earth. Hey everybody, welcome to the Vegas Faces podcast, where we explore the everyday side of Vegas and what it's like to live in the entertainment capital. I'm David Gavri. I'm a Las Vegas realtor with Realty One Group Summerlin. Shout out to producer Paul behind the scenes, making us all look good. This week's topic is real estate transaction fees. Everything you need to know about the title and escrow process when buying and selling a home. With us today is Chanel Beller of WFG National Title. She's been in the real estate industry for 25 years, and she's here to share her wisdom. Chanel, welcome to Vegas Faces. Let's kick it off with literally what exactly is title and escrow?
Oh man, what a question. So title and escrow is this obscure term that everybody's heard of and nobody really understands what it is unless you're in my business. So when I meet somebody on the street and they ask me, what do you do? I usually just tell them I'm in real estate. But for today's purposes, I will explain to you title and escrow separately because they are two separate things. Escrow we'll start with because that's the easier to understand. Escrow is a person, typically it's an escrow officer, and their function is to collect the monies from all parties, so from the buyer and the seller and from the lender. And what they will do is they will collect all of the monies and they will disperse all of the monies to all of the parties at the appropriate times. And they will also facilitate handling of all of the documentation and the paperwork and make sure that the transaction starts from A to Z and that everybody goes through the process, I don't want to say seamlessly, but as seamlessly as possible. So it's their job to be the neutral third party. And I always clarify when I'm doing signings for my clients that if one party says yes and another party says no, escrow comes to a halt because they don't play referee. They stand in the middle, again, as the neutral third party and wait for everyone to come to a decision, and then they continue forward. And then at the end, they distribute all the monies and record the documents.
Thank you for explaining that. I feel like for sure it's one of those things that we all know the words, but what exactly do they do and why are they so crucial? What about misconceptions? What are some things that escrow and title doesn't do that maybe people think that they do?
Okay, well, let me tell you what title is really quick, and then we'll get back to misconceptions. Title, again, is completely separate. And in Nevada, we have so many people that come here from other places. So I always preface with in Nevada. So title and escrow oftentimes are lumped together. You're going to go to the title company, you'll hear people often say, but when you go to the title company, it's going to typically be your title and escrow company together. So title is going to be your title insurance for the most part. There is an actual title officer that is going to prepare your preliminary title report and is going to look at your what's known as your chain of title. And chances are you, whether you're the real estate agent, whether you're the lender, whether you're the actual buyer or seller, you will probably never talk to the title officer. The title officer typically communicates with the escrow officer, and then the escrow officer, again, being that intermediary, if you will, is the person that will communicate with all of those other people. So the title officer is going to look at that chain of title. So what they're doing is they're looking at your property all the way back to when it was a piece of dirt and going forward. And they're going to look for anything, I'll say funky, anything that doesn't look normal. If there's been any deeds, any documents that look to be forged, they're comparing signatures. Really, in today's day and age, people have gotten really sophisticated, unfortunately, and have learned how to basically prepare for fraudulent documents. So they're cross-referencing signatures on on multiple documents, multiple deeds, seeing do they match, do things add up. They have to kind of play private eye. So that's one of their functions. Another one of their functions is preparing the preliminary title report. And what shows on that is going to be anything that's a recorded document that's a matter of public record. So any liens, any judgments, everything that's on your title. So if you have a mortgage, if you any taxes, any again any liens. So if you owe for child support, if you have an IRS lien, all of those things are attached to your property. Those are going to show on there. They're going to attach those to the preliminary title report. And again, that's escrow's job to then get all of the payoffs on those so that we can make sure that those are satisfied prior to the close so that the new buyer then takes it free and clear, not free and clear, but so that it is clear, and they'll add their mortgage if they're getting a mortgage. They'll add anything that is from their time forward. And one of the things about title insurance that people don't really understand is we are one of the only insurances that I'm aware of that we are insuring for past defects, where like car insurance, health insurance, they're insuring against future defects. So we're going backwards in time and making insurance. Most other insurance goes forward in time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, okay. Have you yourself seen anything wild and crazy like you mentioned about people forging signatures, and how does that manifest into real deal problems that people can maybe watch out for and stay away from?
I don't know that there's anything that you can watch out for necessarily. One of the things that's really common right now, people will talk about, I think it's called title lock or things like that. In Nevada, I can't speak to other states. In Nevada, there's no way to lock your title. And that's one of the things, like you can lock your credit. There's really no way to lock your title. But what you can do is you can sign up through the Clark County Recorder's Office. And I think you can do up to 3 properties. And you will get an email anytime something is recorded against your property. So for instance, what happens is when people own properties free and clear, people can, I don't want to say sell them out from under you, but they can try to do shady things. So that is one of the ways that you can monitor your property so that if something gets recorded and you know that you did not sign that deed, then you can work to unwind it sooner rather than later. Now, when you're living in your home, people and you have a mortgage against it, people typically aren't going to try to do anything. It's when you own the property free and clear, you have a vacant piece of land, things like that. It's called seller impersonation fraud. And that's when you see those type of things happening. We see it a lot on vacant properties that are owned free and clear, and we see it a lot on pieces of land because there's nobody watching it. You typically don't watch your little piece of the desert, that's in the middle of nowhere.
Wow. And so this is all in the realm of title, like you were saying, like we separate title from escrow, even though they operate under the same roof a lot of the time.
Yes, this is all on the title side of it. So that is that, and that's where the insurance is. We are an insurance company at the end of the day.
And you said that the insurance covers future, not past, or both?
No, we cover past, not future.
I see.
We're going backwards. So, and one of the things that you'll hear that I say is a lot of times, most of our people are selling homes, right? That they live in or that they're purchasing. And we are ensuring that great Aunt Bertha, let's just say, from 3 transactions ago doesn't come. Let's say, David, that you are purchasing a home and you move in and I was the seller and from 3 transactions ago, and my great Aunt Bertha had an ownership interest in the property and I sold it. I did something shady, and great Aunt Bertha comes and says, "Hey, David, knock, 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 knock at your door. I was supposed to get a piece of that sale 3 transactions ago." And you're like, "What are you talking about? You weren't the seller when I bought it." Well, that's where the title insurance would come in. We would go look back at the chain and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, Great Aunt Bertha, I see that you were an owner of 123 Flower Street, 30 years ago. Well, let's see, let's look at the chain of title. Let's see where that deed transfer happened. Did someone do a fraudulent quit claim deed to get Great Aunt Bertha off? Let's figure out where this happened and how it happened, and then we'll take a look at that. So that's where the title insurance comes in. Was it in fact fraudulent? Did Great Aunt Bertha, is she now elderly perhaps and has forgotten that she did actually sign that? Things like that.
Very fascinating, and thank you for going in depth to explain that.
Yeah. And of course, there's a million horror stories, but there's many more transactions where there's not a horror story, So, but I will say that both jobs are both functions are very, very important, very critical. I can't tell you how many times the escrow officer is on the phone with every party because they talk with the HOA company, they talk with the trash company, they talk with sewer, they talk with buyer's agent, seller's agent, they talk with the buyer, the seller, they deal with all of the parties, and they have to collect the information from everybody, and they have to make sure that they get it all and that they get it all right, because they have to prepare the settlement statement, which is like a giant receipt for the transaction of debits and credits. And they have to make sure that it balances at the end. So,
wow. And I want to get into that later. I definitely want to
yes.
touch on the settlement statement. Before we do, can we go into misconceptions that maybe people would call your office for when maybe you guys aren't the place for their type of question?
A couple of times, one recently, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, someone called and asked, right now with everything that's going on with NAR, and I can't speak to it, but a lot of buyers are thinking about going unrepresented. And we had a buyer and a seller call into our office just yesterday and say, hey, we've got a contract. We don't know what to write on the contract. Can you please explain the contract to us? And we said, absolutely not. We cannot explain it to you. Well, we don't understand it. And we said, well, that you should probably consider getting some representation. That's what real estate agents are fantastic at. Well, we don't want to hire a real estate agent. We said, okay, that's fine, but we cannot give you any advice. We cannot give you any legal advice. We cannot give you any representation. We can tell you to put your name here and sign here, but that's about all we can explain to you, because we cannot, by law, give you any legal advice. And that's what we would be doing by telling you what to fill in these blanks and what explaining the contract. So that is a call that we have gotten. Another common call that we get is, can you prepare deeds for us? So, you've taken title as Jim and Sally, married woman, married sole and separate property, let's say, or married joint tenants, however you want to take title, doesn't matter. And after the close of escrow, oh, my agent, or oh, my friend, or oh, so-and-so, they told me I should put it in a trust. Great. That's a great suggestion. But outside of the scope of the escrow, we should not be preparing documents for you. That would be something that your attorney can do, or that a deed preparation company can do. But we should not be preparing additional documents for you.
Is that something that maybe title and escrow offices could do in the future, or is that a total
outside of the scope of the escrow? If it's not part of the escrow, they should not be doing it.
Okay, conflict of interest?
Not a conflict of interest, there's just liability.
Chanel, I want to switch to some Vegas talk. This is, after all, a Vegas podcast. You've lived in Vegas for a long time, and what I would like to know is, despite the negative stereotypes of, Sin City, why do you think Vegas keeps growing? What do you think it is about Vegas that is making Vegas grow into what it has become?
Well, having lived here nearly all of my life, I absolutely love Las Vegas. Most of my family doesn't live here any longer. They live in the South primarily, and I love to go visit the South. I think it's charming, it's quaint, it's beautiful. But I will tell you, there are so many great things about Las Vegas. our weather can't be beat. I mean, aside from 122 degrees for one day this year, I mean,
Yeah.
aside from the heat, which is I mean, for the most part, it's pretty tolerable, because everywhere has air conditioning, and that's not the case in a lot of places. Everywhere in Las Vegas has air conditioning. We have an abundance of pools, and if you don't have one in your backyard, there are so many that you can go use for free or for very inexpensive. Um, you can drive to the beach in 4 hours. You can drive to Lake Mead in less than an hour from no matter what part of the city you live in. You can drive to Lake Havasu in 2.5 hours. You can drive to Mount Charleston in about 45 minutes or an hour from most places. We have incredible hiking all around town. We just have so much that you can do outside of, I mean, like I don't ever go to the strip. I avoid the strip like the plague. So we have so much that you can do within a very short driving distance. So that's number one. Number two, our tax structure can't be beat. We have no state income tax. It's very favorable for businesses. Our cost of living is incredibly affordable, relatively speaking. I'm not saying it's as good as it once was, but I'm saying it's probably as good as it will ever be, because we have become a truly, in my opinion, we are as good as any major metropolitan city now. We have the Las Vegas Aces, which is the WNBA team. We have the Golden Knights, which is a hockey team. We have a soccer team. We have the Aviators. We have, I mean, we're having the baseball team that's coming. So I don't think it's going to be long before we have an NBA team. We have Formula One. So we have all of these major sports. Our entertainment can't be beat. I mean, I haven't lived in another city, but I don't know any other city that has the amount of entertainment that we have for, I mean, yes, some of it's very expensive, but we have local entertainment that is free every single night of the week. I don't know any other city that has that. Our dining is hands down second to none. So for that reason, and probably a million more that was just rolling off my tongue.
Yeah. Oh,
um,
speaking of free entertainment, not to put you on the spot, is there anything that you can mention? Anything that you can talk about?
I have to give a shameless plug. My husband's cousin, Sierra Black, if you happen to have attended the LSU USC game at Allegiant Stadium, she sang the national anthem, but she performs at Ole Red regularly, and she's incredible. So that just happens to be one I could think of off the top of my head.
And again, put you on the spot for what you said, dining. I 100% agree. Like the dining here, the food here is unbeatable. Not just the food, but also the service. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's just very competitive in those fields to where if you're just average, like you won't last. Like you have to be stellar in order to
Mm-hmm.
last. Do you have any favorite restaurants or any places that you would love to recommend?
I would say one of my favorite restaurants. I live in Summerlin. That's where I've lived for the last 22 years, I think. I don't know. We've lived in Summerlin a very long time. Downtown Summerlin is one of my favorite places to eat and shop. But I love Grape Street, and that's in downtown Summerlin. Now, I'm not going to go out and say that it's the world's greatest dining, but it is phenomenal. It's a great place to eat for lunch. It's a great place to eat for dinner. I absolutely love it. The baked brie is incredible. I'm probably the last person to ask about dining options because I have to eat gluten free. So my dining is a little bit limited, but I will tell you, Grape Street is phenomenal. I really love pho. And so in Chinatown, there's incredible places to go there. So, but like I said, I'm a little bit limited on dining. So,
I have to agree with you on pho. I feel like everyone loves ramen, like come this time of year as it starts to cool down. But
mhm.
I love Vietnamese food altogether. But
So do
the
I.
pho soup, oh man, yeah. You just mentioned Chinatown. Like, there's too many places in Chinatown to mention. Like, you just have to go there and experience it because it's like it's just as big as the Las Vegas Strip. but
Hmm.
just for restaurants and shopping and markets and things like that. But
Oh
that's
yeah,
a
it's
place.
incredible.
Mary and I love recommending Chinatown. We're like, oh, you like the strip? That's great. We're gonna take you over to Chinatown. It's like a mile from the strip. We're gonna have another outing
Whole
that
other
you,
experience.
yeah, it really is. And we have family members that come here literally for the Chinatown. They're like, we don't even care about the strip. Just take us to Chinatown.
Oh, I love that.
So, all right, going back to title and escrow, you
Mhm.
mentioned about how people they call and ask you about trusts. Can you go into that a little bit on handling a trust when buying and selling a house?
Okay, so trusts like I can't sing this any louder from the rooftops. So we get calls so many times saying, so and so has passed away and I would like to sell the property. However, it ends up having to go through probate because of the way the property was titled, meaning the way it was vested. And so, one of the things that I recommend to everybody is to put their property in a trust. Now, we cannot help them do that. An attorney can help them do that. They have to create the trust and then once they create the trust, typically the attorney will put the property in the trust for them, prepare the deed, put the property in the trust. So, that is one of the best things that you can do for your loved ones, in my opinion, is to put a property in a trust, um, to save your future loved ones the headache and the hassle of going through probate. Because once you
And
pass
Chanel,
away, the last thing, go ahead.
oh no, you finished. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So that's just my little soapbox speech because we see people come to us and they're just devastated that a loved one has passed and they're wanting to sell the property and then they find out that they can't. And that's a terrible thing. But secondary to all of that is oftentimes people will come to us and sell the property and they get down to closing and we ask them how would they like to receive their funds? Would they like them wired or would they like them in a check? And regardless of which option they choose, when the property is owned by a trust, what a lot of people don't understand is that a trust is when you have a trust, the trust becomes the owner of the property. So if you have, my last name is Beller. So if I have the Beller Trust now owns the property. Chanel no longer owns the property. Chanel can be the trustee of the trust, but Chanel doesn't own the property. So I cannot issue a check to Chanel Beller. I have to issue the check to the Beller Trust. And that's all fine and good, but a lot of people don't realize that they probably never established a bank account in the name of the trust if the only asset that is held by the trust is the home. So when they get down to closing and I ask them, how would you like to receive your proceeds? They say, okay, in a check. And then we write the check to the Beller Trust. They're like, well, I can't cash this.
Oh
And we
no.
say, you need to go set up a bank account in your trust. And they are packing and they don't have all of the things that they need. And it just becomes a headache. So, one of the things that I tell all of my real estate agents, all of my clients is when you take your listing and you see that the property is in a trust, the first thing that you should do, or if you are a homeowner and you have your property is in a trust, one of the things that you should do is set up a bank account in the name of your trust so that when the time comes for you to sell, you already have this ready to go. Because we cannot issue, I don't care if I'm the trustee, that's fine. It's no different than if you have the Chanel Beller Trust and Jim and Sally Jones could be the trustees. Just because my same name is the name of the trust, I still can't issue it to that name. It has to be to the trust.
To go like super layman terms, what would even be the reason and benefits of establishing a trust in the first place?
I can tell you why I did a trust. I can't tell you what the benefits for everybody is, but I can tell you why I did a trust. Because when we initially set up our trust, my son was underage. And so we set up our trust. Even still, he's not on title. So in order for him to be able to get access to our home, basically, he would have to be put on title. And I didn't want him on title. I still don't want him on title, because then he has decision making abilities. Okay. And right now, and probably forevermore, I don't want him to be able to decide, hey, he has ultimate decision making abilities on our home. It's my home, right? However, when the time comes that I pass, I want him to get the proceeds from the sale of the home. So the trust is the vehicle, basically, to say what happens with the proceeds of the home. So I can say who gets the money from the sale of my home without them being on title to the home and having decision making abilities. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I could put in my trust, I could designate that I have him and whoever else to split up all the proceeds however I want, as opposed to the way it is right now, or the way it was before we had the trust. It's me and my husband on title. So no matter what happens, the check goes to me and my husband. If I added him to title now, the check would basically be divided three ways. It would be now that my son's an adult, it would be my son, my husband, and me. So it would be a
Wow.
third, a third, a third. Does that kind of explain it in layman's terms?
Yes, you did a great
You can
job.
add people to title, and this is what some people do. They don't understand the unintended consequences of when they add someone to title. They'll add a brother, let's say, because all's fair in love and war, right? And me and my brother, we get along fantastic. So I'm going to add my brother to title. And then, I don't know, my brother runs over my dog on accident, God forbid. And that's it. I'm never speaking to him again. Done. But guess what? He's on title. I added him to title. I should be able to kick him off my title. That's not how it works. He has to willingly sign off a title.
Wow. Wow. So it can get messy if you're not careful, if you don't read the fine print, which the last thing I want to get into is the settlement statement. Speaking of paying attention to the fine print, because the
Yes.
last thing that when Mary and I work together on our real estate transactions, we want our clients to never feel surprised, to never feel like, oh, somebody didn't mention this fee or that fee. So is there a layman's way of explaining the settlement statement, explaining the types of fees that you should expect, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, things that people may think don't exist or just take for granted. They just think, okay, I'm going to sell the house and I'm going to get the money, and that's going to be that. Take it away, Chanel.
So the way I like to explain the settlement statement is it's a giant receipt for the transaction. And it's going to have debits on one side, credits on the other side. Starting at the very top is you're going to see the sales price, which, depending on which side of the transaction you're on, is either a debit or a credit. So if you are the buyer, the sales price is a debit. If you're a seller, it's a credit. So does that make sense to start?
Yep, we're going back to Accounting 101, a class that I did not do well in.
Yeah, that we all hate. And then then you get your loan. If you're a buyer, typically you get a loan. And then that's a debit or a credit. So it's not a debit or a credit. It's going to be a credit because you're being credited that money from the lender. So the purchase price is the debit and then the loan is the credit. And then it goes on, so on and so forth. But that's how it starts. And then what you're going to see, and a lot of times this can trip up some of the sellers, is you're going to see the prorations. And what prorations are is anything that they may have paid for in advance. And you'll see this on the buyer and the seller, but if they paid their HOA in advance, if they paid their sewer in advance, and because a lot of times things are paid in 30-day increments, they're paid monthly. So you'll see the HOA, they're going to be debited and credited depending on which side they're on for that difference. So if you're closing on the 17th, there might be, or let's just use the 15th and it's a 30-day month for simple math. You're going to see a 15-day debit and credit, depending on which side you're on, for that amount. So the buyer is going to have to credit the seller for those 15 days. Does that make sense?
Okay. And then
So,
what about like if we zoom out? Like I feel like a lot of people still don't even really know what an earnest money deposit is.
so an earnest money deposit is it's a negotiable amount. So it's negotiated between the buyer and the seller on the property or on the purchase agreement, and that is an amount that is put in good faith, basically because the seller's taking their home off the market for X amount of days, hoping that the buyer is going to close, and it's held in escrow until it's either released at the close or sometimes it's released to the seller because the buyer doesn't perform. So let's just say for easy math, it's $5,000. We've seen where that $5,000 gets released to the seller early because they need to extend for whatever circumstances. And it's in good faith saying, hey, I know that we didn't close in 30 days. We need an extra 30 days, but we're going to release our earnest money deposit, that $5,000 that we put up front, so that we can get that extra 30 days because we know we're sorry you were put out. We know we're asking you to keep your house off the market for 60 days now, but we promise, pinky promise, hopefully, that we can close in the next 30 days. Or, hey, it's the $5,000 same earnest money. We're putting this up. We're going to close in 30 days, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So take your home off the market. Don't show it to anybody else. And we're going to go ahead and perform.
Yeah. Can we also get into, because I've been asked this, hey, what's the deal with these escrow fees and title policy? How would
So
you like to explain?
the escrow fee is the fee that the escrow officer and the escrow company get paid for doing all of those things that I talked about that the escrow officer does. So for collecting the monies from everybody, for preparing all of the documents, for making sure that it goes as seamlessly as possible, for making all those phone calls, requesting all those demands, doing all of the work that the escrow officer does. The title fee is what you're paying for your title insurance, whether it's the lender's title policy or the owner's title policy. Now, the only time you won't see a lender's title policy is if you don't have a new loan.
And
So
another question I get asked for the settlement statement, the RPTT. I think people get intimidated
real
by all the
property
letters.
transfer tax. And it's calculated at $5.10 per $1,000 of the transaction. And that is a fee. I don't want to say it's a pass through fee, but it's not a fee that's charged by the title company or the escrow company or the real estate agent. It is a fee that's charged by Clark County, and it's essentially it's a transfer tax. So on the sale of every property in Clark County, they are getting their tax. I'll say it's typically paid by the seller. We see it more often than not paid by the seller, but it is negotiable.
And that's where it gets fun too. A lot of people, like you mentioned, the buyer at the beginning who wants to just buy the house by himself and not hire anybody, they don't realize that you don't just negotiate the price. You literally negotiate what every side of this transaction, who pays what on every single
Every
side of this
single
transaction.
term. And
I
that
mean,
when that buyer and seller called, they said, well, it says 50-50. What 50-50 of what? We said, we cannot give you any advice. We cannot explain this contract to you.
yeah, and it gets wild because a lot of times people they just think, oh, just do what's usual, but there isn't what's usual. It's literally case by case. It depends on one side will say I don't want to pay that, and the other side will say I don't want to pay that either. And now we have a negotiation we have to figure out.
Well, and when they say normal and customary, well, normal and customary in what market?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, I'm literally asking you questions that I've been asked when I've gone to the settlement statement at the
Mhm.
closing. And I do get asked, hey, what's the deal with the credit checks and the recording fees? What's that all about?
So credit check fees are typically on the lender side. It's included in the lender's fees, and it's a fee that they get charged to run your credit. They typically you don't get a loan if they don't check your credit. So, and it's usually I'll say it's a nominal fee, and I should not say anything is nominal because you can be nominal to bankruptcy, right? It's like, oh, it's only $3.99 for this app, and then you have 40 of them. So I try not to say that anymore, but it's typically a very small amount um, in the grand
Yeah,
scheme of things.
I guess
And then what was the other fee that you mentioned? The
credit
recording
checks
fee?
and reporting fees. Yep.
So recording fees, those are again charged by the Clark County Recorder's Office. A lot of times you will see an estimated recording fee. And the reason that's an estimated recording fee is because we don't know how many deeds we are recording. Are we recording a just one deed? Is it a first and a second? Are we recording multiple? How many pages are the documents? Things like that. So and this is another thing just in general, is a lot of times people will say, we get questioned on the notary fee. Well, why are you putting a notary fee on there? I'm going to be in the office. Why is it an out of state notary fee? Well, we have to use notaries in the office and they do charge. So there's that. I'm going to be in the office. So then we change it to an in-office notary fee as opposed to the mobile notary fee. Lo and behold, I swear to you, everybody who's buying or selling a house goes on vacation during closing. It's what happens. You buy or sell your house and you go on vacation simultaneously. And then they need a mobile notary, which is not a problem. The problem comes, it's not necessarily an issue on the sales side. It's on the purchase side where it becomes an issue when they're getting a loan, because they have to disclose the fees before they draw docs, and there's a certain tolerance level, and I don't know exactly what it is, but they can't be above or below by a certain threshold. And if they are, then they have to redisclose, which starts the whole thing all over again. So it's better for us to disclose at the dollar amount that we anticipate it to be than under disclose or over disclose. And we're pretty good at doing it right where we need to be. So we can always adjust it later. And it's better to do it that way than to be short and then have to redisclose.
Yeah. Chanel, are there any nightmare situations that you see at the closing that if people knew about this, maybe they can avoid?
Yes. Number one, if you are married, we will find out. So tell us. It always slips. It always slips. And there's
Why would people hide that?
They try to hide it for multiple reasons, but one of the big problems is when they're selling. If you're married, we have to check, because when you're buying or selling, we not only check the property, but we check the person. We run what's called a general index, which is why we have you fill out the statement of information with your name, your social, where you've lived, things like that, because things not only attach to the property, they attach to the person and they follow you wherever you go, kind of like on your credit. So when you're married, they will attach to your spouse as well, because we have what's called in the state of Nevada community property. So we need to check your spouse. And people try to hide their spouse. Oh, well, I haven't talked to him in 10 years. Well, that's great. You've owned the property for 20. And they have community property interest in this house. So they have to execute a spousal deed, removing their community property interest. I don't care that you don't talk to him. I don't care that she's a jerk, any of those things. We still have to have them execute the spousal deed. Otherwise, remember Great Aunt Bertha that I was worried about coming back? Well, you know what's worse than Great Aunt Bertha is a really upset spouse that finds out that you sold the property while you were still married to them.
Wow.
Even though you haven't spoken in 10 years. So that's a big deal. And what happens every time? People spill everything in their signings. Oh yeah, I'm so glad that jerk Chanel she's not getting a penny of this. And I'm like, oh, who's Chanel? Oh, Chanel's that jerk that I'm still married to that I haven't talked to in 10 years. And then ding, 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 ding.
Wow.
So like I said, we almost always find out.
Wow. What else do you guys find out?
Or they tell their agent and their agent spills it, or you know what I mean? It's just better if you're married, let us go find them.
Wow. Okay. All right. Anything else as far as avoiding a situation that we don't want to run into?
It's always better. Like we've had people who have multi-million dollar IRS judgments, and they just think that they can't sell the property. And I would always say, like, if you're a real estate agent, to let us work with the client And a lot of times the IRS will take some of the proceeds. Well, they'll take all the proceeds from the house and release. And then what they'll, like I said, that will attach to the person. So if they own any other properties, they'll attach to those other properties. If they don't own any other properties, it will just stay on that person. So if they were to buy another property, they'll suck all the proceeds out of that. It'll just follow them around for forever. But they'll take what's called a partial release. So I don't think that they can't sell, like they owe $5 million to the IRS and there's only $500,000 in proceeds. They'll take all 500,000, don't get me wrong, but just because it's 5 million and 500,000 doesn't mean it can't happen.
Yeah, wow. You've seen it all, I would imagine. For all the really good transactions, like yes, there's more good ones than bad ones, but the ones that go south, boy, you
just when I think I've seen it all, I haven't seen anything. But another thing is we've seen minors on title. And you can add anybody to title because they don't have to. I can add my dog to title if I wanted to, quite honestly. But if you add a minor to title, they can't legally sign to sell the property. That's the problem, because they don't have valid ID they're not legally of age to sign a legal document. So what happens is you have to get guardianship of the minor to be able to do that. We had a property, the family was, I believe they were Chinese, they were Asian, and they bought a property here in the United States and with the intention of it being for their minor son. And they had some relatives that were living in it with him. And I think they passed away. I don't remember exactly what happened, but the property needed to be sold to care for him, and he couldn't sell it. It was only in his name. So the family had to go to court and get guardianship in order to be able to sell the property on his behalf.
Chanel, this will be my final wrap-up question. This will be a fun one. How does it work whenever you see stories where whoever it is, they don't have any children, they don't have any heirs to leave their house to. So they put in their will, I'm going to leave my house to my dog or to my cat or to my pet squirrel or whoever. How does that work? Like like logistically, realistically, like what does that even look like? Does it just go to probate and then it belongs to the government? Like what happens there?
That's a really good question. A will isn't sufficient. I don't believe a will isn't sufficient for conveying property. Again, that's why you have to have a trust. But when there are no heirs, I don't know what happens to the property. I'm not exactly sure. That's a really good question.
Well, that'll be our cliffhanger ending, and we're going to have to find someone who knows.
You know who would be a good person to get to answer that question would be a probate attorney.
There we go.
They would know the answer.
We've started the rabbit hole. I love this. All in all, thank you so much for being here, Chanel. Before we close out, where can people find you? Tell them about your Instagram, whatever it is that you'd like to promote. Go for it.
Yeah. If you have any title or escrow questions, you can reach me at cbeller, B as in boy, ELLER at wfgtitle.com, or my phone number is 702-510-9810. You can always find me at my Instagram, which is at Chanel Beller, CHANNELLEBELLER. So thank you so much for having me. This was a great time.
Thanks so much for being here. You're always super helpful. You always have lots of wisdom and advice and helpful tips for people like us. So I can't thank you enough for doing this today. Thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, Chanel. And congrats. You are now one of the Vegas Faces.
Thank you.
Thank you for subscribing to Vegas Faces on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok under the name Gavri Group. That's Gavri Group. Thanks, everybody. See you at the next episode.